let's record. So session 11, this is our very last session in this series, Content Literacy in Action. And we are just wrapping up this content literacy series. So let's go ahead and dive in. Our objective today is that participants will be able to implement the writing frame support with your students while using your high quality instructional materials. Here's our agenda. We're going to review very briefly the content literacy series as a whole. We're going to talk about the purpose of the writing frame support. We're going to see what it looks like in action, talk about some next steps and a closure. Okay, so we've really been talking a lot about Scarborough's reading rope, and we've been saying that this content literacy series in particular focuses on this top strand, this upper part of the rope. And, you know, a lot of times I say that my teachers ask me, you know, what can I do to improve reading comprehension? And so assuming that kids can decode and they have word recognition skills, these are all the different things that we can do to improve on comprehension. And, you know, for kids, unless there's a whole class thing, different things are going to be different for different kids that they might need help with to help with reading comprehension. And so this particular structure today is definitely one of those things that can help guide reading comprehension, because there is a direct link between reading and writing. Writing, you know, it helps them to understand better what they're reading as they write. But we said that these upper parts, as they become increasingly strategic, our students, it helps make a skilled reader. And we've dove in, to quite a few of these pieces throughout the last 12 weeks together. Background knowledge, we really haven't talked a whole lot about, but especially my ELA teachers, I feel like this is something that's definitely a highlight now. People are well aware that we need background knowledge about certain topics to comprehend it better. We did have our support on vocabulary. We definitely talked about syntax and semantics. And this one today kind of gets into those last two a little bit. So content literacy series is a series that was developed by me through my work as an instructional coach, and, you know, walking through different classrooms. I've taught in some of the biggest districts in the state. And I noticed that different teachers had different training in regards to how to implement or roll out the curriculum, their pedagogy when they're teaching things. And so even though some of these moves are in the curriculum, we don't all do them at the same level of intentionality, the same level of purpose. Not everybody was getting the same results for them. And I also understood that direct link between implementing these correctly and raising students' literacy scores, or the ability to read and comprehend the material that they're learning about. So this content literacy series builds proficiency within the 4 areas of literacy, which are reading, writing, speaking and listening, using your high quality instructional materials in a whole class setting. So this is not something you can use in small group as well, but these are something that it's something that you can do as a teacher move in your whole class setting, using your regular materials that you're using every day already, just to highlight. So these are the different ones. For reading, we had our whole class read aloud, partner reading, independent reading, annotating text, direct and explicit vocabulary instruction, and reading and writing for a purpose. We've covered all of those together in this series. And then our writing ones were creating a claim, reading and writing for a purpose, summary writing to develop comprehension, using rubrics, using student exemplars. And then today we're covering the very last one in here, which is writing frames. And then coming soon is our speaking and listening component, which will be a discussion tracker, a Socratic seminar, and a fishbowl discussion. And these are so important to really helping kids to dive deep and truly understand what it is that they're reading by having that conversation. So let's just hop out of this for just a second so you can look at the series. If you go to louisianabelieves.com and you search up literacy and you click on literacy library, this is the second pillar. This is literacy instruction, intervention, and extension. And this is where our content literacy series is housed, okay? This very top thing is a little slide deck of an introduction to content literacy and the supports. Then there's a purpose and overview document that talk about the research behind this. And then all of the different supports are here. And we'll dive more into today's support in just a second. If you're trying to access future recordings, in this series, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go to Louisiana Believes. You're going to type in literacy. You're going to click on Louisiana Literacy. and you're going to scroll all the way down to literacy library. This is where the content literacy series is housed. This is where previous recordings are. Professional growth will have all of our recordings here. So we have, if you haven't checked it out, we have a middle and high school PD series here, a K2 and a leader PD series, and then down in a para and support staff PD series. And then at the very bottom is this series that we've been going through together. So that can all be found here. Let's jump back in. Okay. So our purpose for writing frames is to give students a structure to communicate what they are trying to say in a coherent and academic manner. A lot of times, many different rubrics across content areas reference students' ability to organize their writing and to write in a clear and coherent manner. And writing frames are explicitly for that. It's a great tool for that. The purpose is also to develop an understanding and application of the concepts of the content area text. Different, looking at that bottom area of the top part of the rope, print concepts, different textbooks are written in a different way. If you're in an ELA class and you're reading a literary text and then you go into science and you're reading a science journal, understanding how these are constructed and written, text structure, really helps to understand and apply the ideas there. And so writing frames can help with that too. Lastly, a purpose is to understand the parts of sentences and paragraphs, as well as improve overall writing proficiency. If students see good writing on a regular basis and they see how you produce that writing on a regular basis, their writing is going to become much more proficient. And as a side note, they'll understand the content they're reading about and writing about much better. Okay, so there's some pre-work that goes into writing frames. The first thing you have to do is understand what a writing frame even is. That's really important. So a writing frame consists of a skeleton or an outline to scaffold children's nonfiction writing. Writing frames can be used for fictional writing too, like for narratives as well, but they're, especially on a secondary level, much more basic. It might just say these are the parts, right? You need to have dialogue, you need to have setting, but it's not going to be bam, bam, bam in this order necessarily. The skeleton framework consists of different keywords or phrases according to the particular generic form, and this comes from Ray and Lewis. The intention is to provide the support as long as it's needed and start to scaffold it away as students become more proficient, okay? So initially, the whole class might need this. You're writing an argumentative piece and you have this frame up and you're showing students how to do it. And as students start to become more proficient, you can start taking pieces of it away. You can take it away as a whole class and use it just in the small groups where students need it. But the intention is not that you're leaving these writing frames up for the entire school year. You determine who needs it, how long do they need it, that kind of thing. The next thing you need to do is preview or create a writing prompt or a task question. So you're going to consider what type of writing the students are doing and what writing frame works best for that particular type of writing. Examples included in here in this particular support are explanation, which is going to be used a lot across all the different content areas, argumentative, analysis and prediction, which is very heavily used as well across content areas, and cause and effect. But you are free to create your own or use others as you understand the process and how to implement them. They're a great tool to use and great to use for accommodations and modifications later too. Then you're going to develop an exemplar using the frame so your own thought process and expectations for students are clear. So sometimes when we're teaching, we have our materials, we have our texts, we have a question that comes with the materials, or sometimes we're creating our own, and then we just jump into teaching. And we're not really clear about what our expectations are for exactly what should be written, how long should it be, how many details should be included. If you jump into your teaching exercise and you're crystal clear about what your expectations are, you're going to communicate them better and you're going to see more consistent results from your students. This particular support in particular, that's very important to do. Okay, step one, official step one. Now we're ready to start doing it. You're going to display the writing prompt and help students deconstruct it so that students know what is being asked of them. And what I mean when I say that is the question's up. And if you have not already taught a routine for how to dissect a question, or what we call task analysis, you're going to do that with them. You're going to teach them how to do that so they know exactly what they're answering. Step two, you're going to display the writing prompt and explicitly model filling out the writing frame. This is a step that's often skipped. I've seen teachers try to like do this as an accommodation or modification. They're going to put up a writing frame, or they might even hand out a photocopy of a writing frame for some students to use and not others, but they've never modeled how to fill it out. And so that's a really, really important piece to include here. You can use a similar prompt to do this with, or you can select a potential response for the prompt presented, a less obvious response that could come from that question. Try not to pick the most obvious response, because that will leave students wondering what it is that they're supposed to write about. In your explicit model, include your thinking for why you chose those words and where or how they can be found or developed. You're going to go back to the text. You're going to say, this is why I pulled these words out. This is why these words fit here, or this is why I came up with these words to fill in here. Model your use of transition words and connectives and why you chose those. Students can use your thought process when filling theirs out as a guide. You're going to start to hear and see the students adopting your thoughts as you're writing into their own. They can add and take away from your process as needed, but they should have a firm starting point and process that they can use before the release to go ahead and fill out a writing frame on their own. You want to allow students the opportunity to fill out the writing frame and include scaffolds as needed. Students may need a few opportunities for whole class construction of the writing frame before they move to a cooperative group or partners, and eventually to an independent practice with feedback. And so you're always using your students in your class as a guide. If you do one whole class construction where you model your saying explicitly, then you do one together as a whole group and you release them and they're not ready to do that independently yet, bring them back and have another opportunity to do it either as a whole class or as a cooperative group where they're giving each other feedback and helping to construct it together as a group. Step 4 is to provide the answer inside of the frame as well as in a paragraph format. So right now these frames are bulleted points. So we want to show them how to fill them out as bulleted points, maybe initially, especially if you're teaching students that need more support. But eventually you want to show them this is really how a paragraph is constructed, and this is what it looks like in a paragraph format, so that students can see that the paragraph needs to flow and make sense as ideas and sentences build on each other. And so, you know, when they're filling out the frame initially as bullet points, they might not notice the need for connectives or transition words, but as you start to pull that away and write it as a paragraph, they'll see the need for that then. Step 5 is have students proofread their frame to ensure their answers make sense. This is another step that often gets skipped, but it really helps improve writing because they are starting to self-reflect and self-correct their writing as they see good writing all the time. Okay, so let's say that it's now time to do this. This is my class. Good afternoon, class. Good afternoon, Ms. Cleaver. Today, we're going to use writing frames to construct our writing. And writing frames help give us structure for our writing so that our ideas are organized and so we can include the most essential information in our answer. They help us display a complete understanding of our content that we're writing about. So the goal when we're using our writing frame is to think about what things are there for us to fill out. And we're going to start to internalize those things and the order they happen in so that you can write like that when the frames are no longer available to you. This is going to start to become part of your thought process. Today, we're going to work on building out our explanation for our prompt. Okay, we've been learning about wind turbines. We read our text. We annotated our text on wind turbines. Today, we're going to answer this question. Why are wind turbines an excellent fuel source? Okay, and the frame that we're going to use today is our explanation frame. That's the one we're using, and we're going to fill it out together. And you're going to complete the next one in your cooperative groups in a minute. Okay, so in our explanation frame, the first thing we need to do is we need to come up with an answer. And our question, this should also be up for them. Okay, our question is, why are wind turbines an excellent fuel source? So the first thing we're going to do is the very first sentence, we're going to provide an answer to our question here. Why are they an excellent fuel source? Sorry, guys. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to our passage, our text, and we're going to see what are the different reasons that they were a good fuel source. And we're going to pick what we think was the best reason for why they were a good fuel source. The next thing says there are many reasons for why they were a good fuel source. The main reason or the chief reason is this. That's going to be our second sentence. Okay, our third sentence might say another reason is, and if we think we have another reason, we could say a further reason is. We might not have that many different reasons, but we're going to exhaust them all And we have a really good, well-developed writing. We have a lot of proof, we have a lot of explanation, and that's what's called the development of our writing. Okay. And then we're going to end it. We're saying, therefore, this is why wind turbines are the best fuel source, or whatever, however we want to end that. Okay. And these are great, great things to use to transition between sentences and connectives. Another reason, a further reason, and therefore, we're going to start to use that a lot in our explanation writings. Okay. So let's start this out. Our question was, why are wind turbines an excellent fuel source? So I'm going back, I'm thinking back to my text. I have my text up. My students are looking at the text with me, and I point them back out to the point in the text where it says, ooh, let me get out of here. Back to where it says, wind turbines are an excellent fuel source because they harness wind to provide a clean energy source. So I thought that the most important reason was they're a good fuel source because it's clean energy. That's why. Okay. And there's many reasons that they're clean, but a main reason they're clean is because wind turbines also help to pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Okay. And then another reason is, and I'm going to pull one more reason out of my text. And I am modeling this for my students, and I'm using them again as a gauge. If I see that my students are successfully doing this, and they don't need me to keep going back in the passage to pull, this is where I pulled it from in the text, this is why I pulled this particular sentence in the text, I can start to skip those pieces, but you're using them as a guide. I often say when we're teaching, we look out into the crowd, into our little students, and if they have little question marks on their faces, we know that we need some more explanation there before we release them. If you can't see the little question marks, you have to wait until you release them and you're walking back and you're circulating and you're looking at the writing to see, okay, did they make the connections? Are they pulling good reasons? If not, pull them back and model that again. That's the most important part of the strategy. Okay. So some next steps. I want you to look at upcoming lessons to decide which text would be best to model how to use this particular support. Throughout the series, I've really tried to use different content areas to model from. I've used science, I've used social studies, I've used ELA. I didn't use any math. Sorry, math teachers, I'm gonna have to do smart math. But each content area is gonna have a great text to do this from. This, in thinking of math, is a great thing to do with those model practice 2 and 3 problems where they're explaining their thinking. This is a great thing to do there. Their frame is going to look a little bit different from math, but it's a great habit to get them into if they need a further developed explanation, for sure. Then I want you to print or bookmark the support so that you can refer back to the explicit directions. Sometimes we're like, okay, I know how to do a writing frame. It's fine. We're going to do the writing frame. We're going to move on. And you don't get the results that you want from it. Go back to those explicit directions in the support to see that, hey, can I be more intentional in this particular step? And so really self-reflect to see where in the support you need to highlight better. Then ask yourself after the lesson, if you highlighted the intentionality required from the support, are you noticing a difference as a result of implementation? You definitely should. You should definitely see a difference as a result of you implementing this. So let's just jump into the support itself real quick and just see what it looks like and how to navigate it. So all of them are done this way. This particular one is going to look the same no matter the content area. Usually we have different ways you would use it within the content area. All of these, though, are going to be to construct well thought out sentences, paragraphs, or essays to convey information. Who could it support? Really anybody, but definitely specifically, this is something, if you have English language learners on your campus, it's a great thing to do for these students in particular, even if the majority of your class has it. Continuing this practice with them is a great support for English language learners and students with disabilities. Okay, those are the 3 different purposes I gave you for why we would do this. And I always tell you why it's so important to communicate that purpose. I gave you the pre-work and the steps explicitly, just like I just laid out for you. I know I'm successful when, you're successful when you see your students are more comfortable writing in the proper structure with or without the need of the writing frame. You'll also notice the students using more transition words and connectives in their writing, and the writing should be organized, developed, and academically appropriate due to the use of these frames. So this one's even a little bit more different because I give you all the different frames that you could use. Explanation, argumentative, which is your claim and your counterclaim, opinion writing. Specifically, this is something that's on a rubric for grades 3 through 5. analysis, prediction, cause and effect, and then there is a personal narrative paragraph. Maybe not a whole narrative, like if I'm looking for 612, but specifically probably this is 3.5 as well, a personal narrative paragraph and the use of connectives and transitions there. Just some notes for secondary students in the upper grades. A semantic map of the elements of a narrative may be more helpful than just the frame because it's so much more, it's expected to be more developed at that point. And C, using student exemplars as part of the writing process for more assistance with this one that can really help complement this particular support. And it's really important to note here too, not all of the lines may be used when constructing a paragraph. Like I said, you might not have 5 reasons why. Instruct students to choose the frames. Like if you have these up on an anchor chart after you have modeled how to use that particular one, you might add it to an anchor chart. Tell them, as you start releasing them to start writing on their own, hey, choose the appropriate writing frame for this particular writing, or help them figure out why would you choose that one. And the text source. Include how to choose the correct frame in your model as well. Like this is how I know to pick this frame. And when you are finished filling in the frame, you should have all the most important information, but it should flow well as well. So you want to fill it out, model how to do it, read back over it to see, hey, do I need something else in between to make this paragraph flow better? Additional considerations are for your students that just need some more support in your class. Consider the ability of each student and their progression as you're teaching and as you move through the different levels of scaffolding. And I've talked about that already. That explicit model, the whole class, the cooperative group, your scaffolding, how much help do they need filling this out? Some students may need the frame longer than others. Consider creating those anchor charts like I talked about so they can refer to them on their own. I love to see students refer to the resources that are up in the class and start using them themselves. I know you do too. Do not feel the need to box students into the writing frames if they are already proficient writers. If you have a super proficient writer, if their writing is very organized, if they have connectives and transitions, don't force them to use this, but recognize that, they are already doing it, but then model for how to do for the rest of the class. You can offer it as a strategy if they would like to borrow some connectors or transitions to add to their repertoire of what they already have in their effective writing, but these are most beneficial to average and below average writers. Ensure students know that this is a support and way of thinking and that the intent is to eventually not need it. They need to know that when you start using it, you're not going to have this forever. This is for you to start thinking this way. Let students know that this will become part of their thinking and their practice, and they're not going to need it anymore. Other writing frames, sentence starters, and signal words can be found here at Achieve the Core. L supports for writing and discussion, and then I have references for where this comes in the research. Okay, let's jump back in. In closure, direct and explicit instruction is the best way to help struggling readers. The modeling and the think aloud piece of this support is providing the largest impact here. Students will become much more proficient with structuring and organizing their writing when they see what good writing looks like and where the information comes from on a consistent basis. Using writing frames allows teachers to provide scaffolding for all students, but especially to those students with disabilities or English language learners. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to write to us at louisianaliteracy@la.gov. Let me go ahead and get out